Hello and welcome back to the Money Bear podcast. I am super excited to bring to you guys today a literal Hollywood actress, Leven Rambin. Leven and I connected on Instagram and we started doing some one-on-one coaching for her kind of money management and also just kind of figuring out what's next for her in her career as she transitions from being solely focused on acting to exploring what other avenues there are available to her, which I love because I think so often we get stuck into this identity of we are what we do and we can only do this one thing. And once we've spent decades, I mean, Levin's been acting for 20 years almost. Once we've put that much time into it, it can be incredibly difficult for us to allow ourselves to switch, to do something different. So I'm really excited to talk about that journey for her because, especially being a public figure, I think that pressure to be an actor and do the acting things in Hollywood can be so great. And the fact that she's been like, I want to see what else there is for me. I want more for my life. I want more security. I want more options. I think it's really cool. So I hope you guys enjoy it. So yeah, let's get to it. And here is our conversation with Leven Rambin. My friend Leven is on the podcast today, and I'm super excited to bring her to you all because she has had quite an interesting background in comparison to all of our other guests on the show. She has been in acting since what? I think you were like 14 when you started.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's been a Hollywood actress since she was 14. She's been doing it for the last 15 plus years. She's had some major roles like you may know her as Glimmer in Hunger Games. The reason I brought up Glimmer first is because when we polled the Instagram audience and I asked, what questions do you have for Leven? So many of them were like, oh my God, what did you think about playing Glimmer? Who did you like talking to? Do you wish your role as Glimmer could have resurfaced and things like that? So we'll do a little bit of a rapid questions down at the end of the podcast episode. But today I kind of just want to talk about your journey. Leven, how do you tell people who you are? If I was like, hey, give everybody your elevator speech.
Oh my gosh. I feel like that's changing a lot all the time. But
Right?
I'm an actor for most of my whole life,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm from Texas. I'm a dog mom, extremely loving dog mom, and animal lover. And I'm just really creative and have a lot of creative vision for myself, the projects I'm in, and creating new projects. And I'm not satisfied just to be in a box, I guess you can say.
Yeah. No, I love that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later on because you and I have talked about this before of how in the United States, it feels like our identity is so closely tied to like what we do. And I can only imagine how that's tenfolded when you're in Hollywood and you're like, I'm an actor, like this is what I do, this is what I'm here for. But like when you want to try other things, that can feel like a barrier. It can feel like an obstacle. It can feel like, oh my gosh, am I giving up on these dreams? So I think a lot of people can relate to that. And so I'm excited to talk a little bit about your journey and what you're doing now. So let's kind of start with the beginning. I know you've started acting really young and you moved to New York when you were super young, living by yourself, handling all that on your own. Can you kind of tell us about that? Like, what was it like starting off and being so independent from such a really young age?
Yeah, I mean, I moved to New York when I was 14 with my mom, and she stayed for like 3 years. And then my dad was very sick with cancer. So she went back, and I had like different guardians and stuff come. But ultimately, I was basically very self sufficient, like, paying my own rent and getting around the city and cabs and stuff. It's like a pretty easy city to be independent in. And so I was working also like every day on All My Children, the soap opera, all day, every day. So I was like, get up at 6 a.m., go to work, come home at 8. Like there really, wasn't much time. But I did manage to like have a lot of fun. But I was also very into the fashion world. And so I got to do go to all the fashion shows. And I just, you know, had a very like socialite life. And my dad just always taught me to like work really hard and save and be responsible. And I feel like one of my first memories was like when I was obviously like 14, 15, I like had his credit card, and
Mhm.
I didn't really, money yet or whatever. So I was taking cabs like everywhere and just other things, I'm sure. And after like, I don't know, 6 months or so of me just mindlessly doing this, he was like, Okay, my Amex bill is $10,000. Like, I remember, like, it being, like, $10,000, and I was like, "Oh, what?
What
I
does that mean?
that? I spent that just going in cabs and getting dinners, and it wasn't even anything, and he was like, "Well, you're gonna pay me back." And I was like, "What?" Like, that was the first time it, like, clicked for me that, like, I was responsible for, like, myself, and
Yeah. Yeah, and if I remember correctly, your dad was a business owner and he's
yeah,
pretty frugal, right? He's been like
yeah, very,
relatively like tight-fisted around money.
yeah.
Yeah. So when you went from kind of growing up in his household, I mean, still, I mean, at 14, moving out to New York, you're still growing up, obviously. But like from the first 14 years of your life, living with your dad and kind of experiencing that level of frugality, and then shifting over to New York, where suddenly you have a lot more autonomy. And eventually, in a short period of time, by the age of 17, you're pretty much doing this all on your own. How did you manage money? Like, how did you figure out what to do on a day-to-day basis? Did he ever sit you down and be like, here's what's appropriate, here's how much you should be saving, here's how much you should be spending, or was it just good luck?
I mean, I think he definitely tried to do that. Did I listen? Absolutely not. Or I was, oh, dad, I don't have time for this conversation. So I know he tried, but being 17 or 16 or 18 or 19, even 20, you're like, whatever. And you're just like
Sure.
working, think, oh, I'm making so much money. Like, who really, like, and I'm not, driving a G Wagon. And like, I know I'm living like below my means. So I should
Hmm.
be fine. Right? That's all I really care about.
Right.
But obviously that wasn't really like sustainable, like, foundation. But
Hmm.
that's kind of how I rocked for my whole 20s. And my mom was very heavily involved with, my finances and like paying my bills and
Yeah.
like stuff like that. Like, she kind of managed my money like for me, where it's where I
Mm,
didn't earn it, and that's,
right.
it was kind of like enabling me to just not learn. So I didn't really start learning, honestly, sadly to say, until like the last year. And that's why I hired you, because I was like, okay, what the hell's going on? Like, I have these systems in place from my mom when I was like 15 that are still running everything and
Hmm.
be updated. So I know that my parents have tried to, or at least my mom and my dad too, different times I can remember them being like, "Do you have a budget?" And me being
Hmm.
like, "What?
What does that
No."
even mean?
Yeah.
Google's
I was
budget.
like, I always was just like, I don't know how much money I make per month. It's going to be so different. So how can I even have a budget when I don't know? It's not like I have like a salary per month.
Right.
So what's the point? Was basically my mindset. And like now I realize that was immature, but I was in my 20s. So
You were supposed to be immature in your early 20s. I mean, we all were. So, I mean, did you ever feel like at times that things were super scary or overwhelming? I can only imagine going from like at 14, I mean, in my teenage years, going from like my small town to, and I don't know if you were in a small town you're in Houston?
I was not in a small town. I
You
always,
are not. Okay. So you were used to a big city already. Granted, obviously, Texas City, New York City, a little bit different. But I would still imagine that the whole process of just like picking up and moving everything would be like super scary and overwhelming.
I mean, it wasn't like, I think I didn't intend to be there for as long as I was. I didn't
Hmm.
know that it would unfold the way that it did. I thought I was going to be there for like a year or 6 months. And yeah, it was scary, but I was like, it didn't seem like that big of a commitment, because they were like, well, we're going to bring you on as on the show and All My Children. And, it was a 6 month kind of trial, I guess. And I was,
Interesting.
okay, if it doesn't work out, I can come back and go to high school. Like, I still felt like safe. It wasn't like, oh, like this is my like one shot at, like, I didn't think of it that way. Yeah, I'm just like, well, this doesn't work out. I'll just go to high school and come back and whatever. I was never like gonna pursue it past that. And then they kept me on for 4 years. And
Wow.
they wanted to keep me on longer. And I was like, no, like, I had just turned 18 and I was like, I want to give prime time TV, what we called it back then.
Hmm.
Um, And so I ended up like booking like my first audition out of the show, and I just went to LA. But back to your point of like being overwhelming, like it was, I feel like it's more overwhelming when I think about it now, because
Hmm.
you know everything when you're in high school. Like, you
Yeah.
think smarter than your parents. And so that mindset was just like running amok all over New York City, because I was like, well, I know everything. My parents are dumb and I'm working and I'm making my own money and paying my own rent. So what's the problem basically? I didn't see how overwhelming it was until like later in life. It kind of caught up with me of like, whoa, that was not.
Yeah. where you look back and like, do you ever feel like part of your childhood was like kind of taken from you?
No, because from what I've heard, high school is not that great anyway. So
Honestly, yeah, you're not wrong.
like I played all the sports in middle school. I, had a lot of family trips and things like that. And I just missed the kind of like crappy parts of high school that I don't think anyone loves anyway. And, I got a leg up on what I wanted to do. So
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I mean, do you feel like looking back, knowing what you know now and looking back at your time in New York before you headed out to LA, is there anything like that you wish you had done differently or that you wish you had guidance on?
I guess that's like a regret. I don't know. Like I don't think so because if I would have like been really serious about money or things, like maybe I wouldn't have taken the risks that I did
Right.
because I was very like spontaneous and like
Hmm.
I've never been a type of person. So I didn't sit there and calculate all the risks of like what this could mean if it doesn't work out. I was just like going for it in the moment and then it did work out in my favor. So I'm glad I wasn't like that. I would have bought real estate like
Ah, yeah.
that is the only thing I regret. I would have bought a lot of freaking real estate in my 20s. I don't think I was ready and or I didn't really feel like I wanted something in California. Like I just
Mm,
California really resonated with me. I just didn't really want to be attached there or have like anchors there. So, but that is the one thing I would change, have done differently.
yeah. So after you left New York, it sounds like you moved to LA for a little while. What was kind of like the path after that? I know you've done a lot of acting since you did All My Children. So what was phase two of this journey for you like? And I know that, a couple of different things have happened along the ways, but take us on the journey, Levin.
Yeah. So New York, went to LA when I was 18 to do the Terminator TV series called Sarah Connor Chronicles, which was like my first show
Hmm.
uh, that I was like a series regular on. And it was really daunting. And I had no friends. And I was like living in like a Hilton hotel and my mom was with me. And yeah, like I wasn't really prepared for like the real world on my own, but I guess no one really is when they like leave
Right.
college school. So I was 18, kind of like living in this like apartment complex in LA or condo building, and like Vanessa Hudgens and Brittany Snow were like in the building too. And so we were all kind of like in this together. Miley was like across the street and like in a house, in a gorgeous neighborhood. So then, I was like, well, okay, I got this show. This is great. And then it was like a couple rough years living in LA and what does that whole life in New York just over? Like it was like an adjustment period of figuring out who I was in LA and who I was as an actor. Like, whoa, what? I was a soap actor. They don't really take you that seriously, like in
Mm,
LA for certain things that I was trying to go out for. So it was like a whole identity kind of breakdown, very depression, honestly. And then just one day I just napped out of it after like 9 months of like feeling sorry for myself. I just was like, get your ass up and like
hmm.
get on the freaking treadmill and like get this shit going.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting Grey's Anatomy after
Mm,
that. So I kind of, yeah, after that, it was like a nonstop train. So it was really me kicking my own ass and being and dropped by agents and being told that I was like, to this or to not enough of that. And
hmm.
so insecure. And then once I took like kind of responsibility for myself, like my health, my fitness, like I was drinking, I just was like lost in LA.
Hmm.
And I got my shit together, so to speak. And I got Grey's Anatomy. And then after that, it was just like thing after thing after thing after thing after thing. And then I moved to New York and then I started doing a lot of TV. And then I was in New York for like 3.5 more years. I was living in Brooklyn, which was a different experience altogether than before. And then that ended and I went back to LA for I'd say 4 years recently.
Okay.
And then got sick of LA. COVID changed everything. And I decided to come spend some time with my family. I've been gone for 20 years and I decided to come be with my family again for, reunite with them. So
That's amazing. So I want to go back to what you were talking about, like this kind of identity shift, because I think it's something that a lot of us can relate to, in especially around that age when you're like facing essentially what feels like the rest of your life. You're like 18 years old and here you are trying to figure it out. Like, okay, what path am I supposed to go on? And I think we can relate to that both at 18 and also folks who go to college and graduate. And it's like the real world is looking you in the face saying like, what do you want to do? And then every time you try to pursue something, sometimes you get just doors slammed in your face. You get like told over and over again that you're not this right person for it, or it's just not happening the way that we imagine. Where do you think you found the grit and the resilience to just be like, I'm not giving up. Like, I'm going to keep doing it. Cause I would think so many people would getting dropped, being like, you're not right for this, or just hearing the word no, especially at the age of 18. I mean, I was fragile. My ego was so freaking fragile at the age of 18. I was like, similar to you, I got so depressed around this transition period of my life. Mine happened really around 21, where I had my entire reason for going to the University of Iowa because I wanted to get into the creative writing program. And I was like, I'm going to, go into out of state debt just for this program because it's supposed to be the best. And I didn't get in. And it was like, instead of me buckling down and learning from the experience, I just was like, well, I'm going to give up. I guess I guess I just wasn't meant for this. And I decided to graduate early instead. But by completely not, obviously everything worked out. I'm really happy with the way that my life has turned out. But for probably 2 years, it was just like I had resigned myself to believing that like I just couldn't do what I wanted. I couldn't be who I wanted to be. And I just gave up. It was tough. It was really hard to give myself that moment of fighting, of being like, no, now we rally. And I think it was largely in part to my ego and just not having the ability to say exactly what you were saying, was like, all right, we gotta rally. We gotta do this. Like, the only person who's accountable and responsible for this is yourself. And I didn't really have that. It was just more like a poor me. And then it just bled into depression and bled into this really intense anxiety, I would say.
Yeah, I can relate to that. That was like a year for me at that time. And I thought, because everything had come so easy to me, I was like,
Right.
well, I'm not in LA. Where is everybody? And like, it was like crickets. And like, I was also being told that I was like chubby, too chubby for this. And that I like, cause I was in my awkward like phase, like I was in my
Sure.
like ugly phase. Like it was bad. Like the skin was bad. The hair was bad. The body was horrible. Like the drinking was so disproportionate. The eating was horrible. So it wasn't good. And I get that, but it was really rough for my ego. It was very difficult because I was handed everything before, like very successful. And on the soap, I was like treated like a queen. Like
Yeah.
I was like well known in the soap world, but then going out to LA and trying to navigate like the more mainstream, crowd, like nobody was like super impressed. I mean, I know where it got me through the door, but like it wasn't like coming easily to me apparently.
Yeah.
And I was just dropped by all these different kinds of agents and stuff. And I guess what kept me going was like I knew I was good. Like
Mm-hmm.
nobody could take that away from me. I was nominated for 2 Emmys. Like I knew I was good. And so the only thing that was gonna stand in my way was me, apparently. So, if I had to like beg or crawl or climb, I did do
Mm-hmm.
that. Very like like if I fired someone, I like went back to them like on my hands and knees being like, please, I need you right now. But there was a dark time where I didn't have an agent or a manager and nobody was calling me. And I remember it. Like my mom was out there again. Like my mom is clear, kind of like my emotional support, always like coming out and having no idea like how her daughter became an actor. Like she's so confused by me, like still to this day. She's like, where did you come from? Like wanted me to be a school teacher. Like,
Aw.
she never thought she would have a daughter like that. Sorry, mom. Anyway, and I was just like, is this the end? Like I just was like looking around like, what? Was all of this just a fluke? It's been 4 years or whatever, and this is just must be a fluke. And so I like picked up the phone and called my old manager from like a couple years before. And I was like, listen, like I know I'm good and I know people know me and I know people want to see me for these roles. And no one can find me because I don't have an agent or a manager right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I will do my best with you. Like I will show up, like if you take me back. And she was like, okay. So it was kind of off to the races after that. And I was like, just, get your ass up and stop, distracting yourself with like partying. And, I wasn't even that big of a partier, but I tried to like be to like fit in and it was just like not a good fit for me.
Yeah.
So I found my path back to a better place. And like,
Yeah. Well, and that humble moment of being able to call somebody from your past and just be like, "Hey, I need you and I will do whatever it takes," is huge. I think that that takes a lot of like humility to just be like, "All right, we need help. We haven't figured it out at this point." So it's like, let's do what we can to reach out to people who do know us. Very cool. So from that point, after the years of LA, you got the Grey's Anatomy and then you started. Also, I have a question for like people who don't know anything about the acting world, aka
yeah.
me. So when you say you have an agent and a manager,
Yeah.
what are their roles? What does an agent do and what does a manager do?
So an agent is, a very kind of established maybe person in Hollywood who's been around for a long time at a big agency
Mhm.
that has clients, and they talk amongst themselves about what projects are casting, and usually they represent a lot of the directors too and
Okay.
produce what's going on, and they receive like casting breakdowns from casting directors who want to see your clients to book these roles. So that's the agent, and they take 10%.
Okay.
And then the manager kind of, I don't know when that formed, but I think the agents just kind of became too big, and like it was like the snake eating its own tail. Like they didn't pay attention to as much detail, or like there was other things in the cracks that they just weren't as hands
Mm,
on. So managers are kind of like filling in the cracks basically of the agents, but they also have their own relationships and connections. And, when you're really busy, they're also the ones that are like scheduling your flights and your, stuff like that. So
okay.
they serve a purpose. And I feel like, yeah, nowadays they're a little bit more like interchangeable. Like you can have
Okay.
one or the back then it was like, who's your agent? Who's your manager? It
Got
was like
it.
not have both. And
Okay.
they pay 10%, by the way.
They both take 10%. So already when you get paid as an actor, you're losing 20% to your agent and manager. Is that after tax or before tax? Before tax? Okay, so wow. And then you're living in California where you're already taxed at a higher rate. Wow, that's a lot. If I was on a brand deal now and like if I don't have an agent or a manager or anything like that, like anything that comes through from a brand deal or anything along those lines comes directly through me, but if somebody was telling me like, "Oh yeah, and all you have to do is pay us 20%." I'd be like, "Get the fuck out of here." Like, hell no.
Well, yeah.
But granted, it sounds like the agents and the managers are doing a lot more work for you,
Yeah.
but that is wild.
I've never heard of an actor like pitching themselves for a
Of
project. It just doesn't
course.
happen. And like, as much as I would love to be like a contrarian and flip the whole script and reinvent the whole wheel, like I basically tried to do that in the last year. I was like, F agents and managers, like, I don't want to pay anybody this anymore. And I just freaked out and I fired both of them.
Mhm.
Actually, but I fired them. It didn't really work like that.
You're like, "This is not how the industry accepts people."
Yeah, how are supposed to act. Like they're not
Yeah.
really supposed to sell themselves. Maybe some people would be great at that. I don't think I would be. I feel like my lane is my lane, and that I just have to kind of surrender. That's how it is.
Yeah, that's just how it works. It's so
Yeah.
interesting. I wonder if that will ever change at all. I mean, it sounds like it's they're doing a lot of work for you, so it makes sense, but it's so interesting hearing it on this end because it's like when I think about it, I would think that you'd have more ability to like negotiate and like find lower fees and things like that. But at the same time, if it's like that's the industry, that's the industry. But there's really nothing to compare it to because it's like we don't have anything. I guess it'd be like a writer having an agent for their book.
Or
Yeah.
like think about
Or
that.
kind of like even having like a PR team, where you're like hiring a PR team who have all the contacts with
Or like
the.
for you, if you hired a marketing, like,
Exactly.
and then I don't know what 20% of what they would take. Yeah, it's wild, but
Yeah, something you don't think about. But I can also understand just not wanting to do that work as well. Like you want to focus on the acting
yeah.
part. So I get that. Now, in your move to LA and over a decade of spending time acting in LA, do you feel like Hollywood and the views of success and like the lifestyle of what it means to be successful in LA, do you feel like that impacted you and your spending and what your view of success was?
Yeah, I feel like I never really got a grip on like what that looked like for me. So I always like kind of lived conservatively, and I'm grateful for that. but I also always felt like it was all going to be running away, or like it was all going to be taken
Yeah.
away any moment. So there's always been a lot of anxiety of that, because there's not really like stability, quote unquote, unless you're on like a series forever and ever and ever, which a lot of people are. I don't know if I would even like to do that.
How did you handle that level of instability? I remember when we first met talking about just like the extremes of what an income year could be for you, just depending on what kind of projects are on the table. It's wild what those ranges are. How have you like handled that from an anxiety perspective? And like, do you feel like you have had any stability?
Yeah, I do feel like I have had stability because I was always taught to save and invest. And I've been
Yeah.
investing. I was, I don't know, 20
Yeah.
probably. And I always knew that I had like that account like there, if God
Hmm.
forbid, and then I was always working. So I was like, okay, this is great. I'm making money. I spend what I need to, but I'm not going to, VIP trips like all the time. So I didn't really think about it that much. I never felt like I was without. Like
Hmm.
I was grateful for that, maybe because I just was successful from a young age, and I just never felt like, oh God, I have to go wait tables. Like that never happened in my acting career. Definitely months of like, oh shit, what's gonna happen? Like I already told you, like that year was really dark. And I was thinking about it earlier. There was a year where I did a pilot, and like I made, I don't know, maybe 70K or something like that.
Hmm.
And then they had me on an option, and I couldn't work for a year and a half after that. Like they kept saying no. Like if I would get an offer, they would be like, no, like you're on hold for this pilot. And I was like, but I have to work. Like
How are you
it was,
supposed to make money?
and I felt like I always have money. Like I have this saved money. So I'm okay. Like I knew I was okay, but it was also like awful because like I would cut my expenses down all the way, but I wasn't sitting there budgeting. I wasn't sitting there paying attention. I was just like, woohoo, la di da. Like I was just hoping, I was like, okay, I see that I have like $40,000 in my account from
I'm
last year.
okay.
I'll
Hmm.
be fine. And then, that kind of ran down, and I'm gonna be like, well, then I guess and then I get another job. So yeah, there's definitely been really dark periods. And I don't think I didn't start thinking about budgeting and money and stuff until COVID, when it all stopped and I
Right.
stopped making money, and there was no chance of it coming in. And
Mm.
that's when I actually sit down and see, oh my gosh, like this is what you spend. This is what you make realistically. You have no clue what's going on. And I was
Mm.
like, God. And then I got like the like unemployment or whatever it was. All my friends were doing that. And so I was like,
Mm.
all right, I'll be fine until, and then kind of it just kept lingering COVID. And it was just like, so that was the first like wake up call, I would say, of
Yeah.
like, look at what's going on, not just willy nilly. Like, again, I bought one Chanel purse in my life. I'm not out here like falling. Like, I've always lived conservatively, but that was where I was like, oh my God, my rent is how much and my car payment is how much. I'm not like 20 anymore. I have to actually pay attention to what I'm spending and doing. And that's when it
Yeah.
really began. That's that's when the anxiety really began.
You
So
were
that's
like,
been a fun.
especially, yeah. Well, I mean, especially because COVID lasted so long, where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, it hit, and then it's like, it just never went away. It was three
Yeah.
years of inconsistencies, especially for like being in person, like getting acting jobs in person. So during that time, you went and back and spent some more time with your family. You're still spending more time with your family, and you're just, it sounds like finding your footing again and deciding, okay, well, what is next? What is something that I want to be pursuing because of this, like, this a little bit of the lack of that stability where you're like, oh my gosh, I need money coming in and things like that. So, kind of tell us a little bit about where you are right now, where you've spent an entire career of acting. You've done the things, you've done the Hollywood, you've also done the New York, and now you're kind of like, in talking to you, I feel like you've been in like your healing girl era, like for a while. So, what are some of the things that you've been doing in this healing Leven stage?
Well, I think one of them is really was healing like my money
Yeah.
relationship of like never looking at my money, never looking at my bills, never looking at, my net worth, never looking at my, anything. Like I was like, I need to, because like, why am I feeling so anxious and how can
Yeah.
I manage this and why am I avoiding this altogether? So
Yeah.
I think like learning how to budget, working with you was a big step for me to like reconcile myself towards my financial life. And I had all these people doing all these things. Like I had a CPA, I had a, accountant, I had a tax guy, I had, I just had all these people and I was like, what are they doing though? Like
Yeah.
what? I have no idea. I have this investment guy. I have this guy for, you know, like an IRA. Like I haven't talked to these people in like decades and like
Right.
what going on? Again, these were all people hired by like my mom or whatever, and God bless her. But
Mm-hmm.
it was to like take control. And so I ended up like learning how to do QuickBooks, even the most like basic stuff that I could have, should have, would have like learned 10 years ago. I have started learning and realizing, okay, this is what needs to be fixed and this is what needs to be fixed. And this is, okay, this is not a real anxiety. This is, and
Mm,
that took a lot of time for me to face and do. And so I like fired people, I hired other people, I worked with different people. So I kind of reorganized my finances in a way that I know what's going on. I
ha-
will have this foundation now, like moving forward, of like the reality of like what it is to be a person in America and in any of like what you are responsible for and how to be responsible for yourself. And I just did not have that before. And I think that not knowing how to really balance my checkbooks or how to reconcile my accounts or what the hell taxes are really or how to do them or how to categorize my spending or how to track my income or expenses. Like I didn't know how to, I wasn't doing that stuff. Somebody was
yeah.
doing, sending me a thing once a year and I was looking at it and I was maybe paying attention, maybe not. Like again, I was just totally avoiding facing it because I was scared, and I think I'm really grateful that I've taken like the time to like learn about all of that and take control because now I can move forward with that and like will always have my like head on reality like about it no matter
Mm-hmm.
what. I'll have, so yeah, that I've been also like in therapy, like I've just been also like, okay, I've been acting for 20 years. I've been
Mm-hmm.
people all over the world. That was great, but I need to find out who Leven is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
who is she? What does she like to do? Who are the good people actually in her life? Or are there any? Or like, what are your boundaries? Like, I just was so like, like all over the place that I felt like I didn't have like a good sense of self because like
Yeah.
you can see yourself in the acting world. And that's kind of what I did. So I actually like took a break from acting for like a year this past year. And it was a really, yeah, like learning about myself, learning about my money, just feeling safe with my family, kind of healing some relationships with that and kind of trying to, yeah, figure out what's next for me, like chapter two, like
Yeah.
how can I be more like independent,
Yeah.
of the world and like still act, but have things of my own too.
Mm-hmm. Have your own like level of stability that isn't
Yeah.
dependent on like what's the next job that you get, like where it's like an income stream or something that
Yeah.
you can always rely on, but you can still do what you love, which
Yeah.
I think is fantastic. I do want to talk more about that discovery process of like, what are those things that you like? What is it that you want to be doing? And kind of learning about identity, because I think that's huge. But first, I wanted to kind of touch again on the discovery process that you had with your finances, because I think that's huge. And I think that I remember our very first session together and the anxiety you felt about even just having the conversation of, I don't know. I feel this shame around the fact that I just don't know. Because to be fair, you've had a whole lifetime of people doing it for you. You never had to know because you had people surrounding you who are all going to do it for you. Like, you have better things to worry about. Go, go do this and we'll handle this part. So, number one, I'm proud of you for doing it, because like that's a scary moment to be like in your 30s and sitting down and just being like, let's figure out what the hell all of this is. And you did
Mhm.
it. And like, I remember from session like 1 to session 3, even from session 1 to session 2, the transformation of your confidence and like our ability to talk about some of the things that you're doing. And I remember, I don't remember who I was talking to, but I was like, you've been like the perfect student. I would like
Aw,
tell you, I would tell you to do something and you would do it, and you would do it hard. And I was like,
yeah,
hell yeah, Leven, let's get it. And so,
that's how I am. So it's like if
oh,
there's a problem in my life, like I will do what I need to do to fix it. Like
yeah.
sitting around
You're
part of me.
very, very
Yeah.
coachable. And I think that's really cool. For you, you know, going into your finances for the first time, what was like the biggest surprise to you?
I think that like what you taught me about like interest rates versus paying off debt, like I was freaked out because I had this loan.
Yes.
I need to pay this loan off. And you were like, no, you don't like the percentage of like return taking like off your investments versus the interest rate on this loan, like it's not the same. It's okay to have that debt. It's okay to
Yes.
have, and pay it off in like that monthly like installment and instead of, you know, I had no clue about that. Like I was so
You
freaked
were
out.
ready to like wipe out your emergency fund. I was like, girl, don't you do it. Like we can pay that bad boy off slowly because it's like I think it's like a 3% or something interest rate. And I was like, that's lower than inflation right now. So,
Yeah, yeah. So I had no idea about any of that. To me, it was all very black and white.
mhm.
You have debt, you want to get rid of it. You have, money, you want to spend it. And like wasn't comfortable feeling like I had like debt, even like credit cards I never used because I was afraid I wouldn't pay them.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, yeah, just I mean, just so many things too. Like just tracking what I actually spent was like a huge revelation of
Mhm.
like, crap, this is where this is all going. And like I wasn't paying attention. And so I was able to cut back a lot of my expenses that were kind of frivolous or unnecessary or unchecked and pay, closer attention to that. And it made me feel more in control for sure.
That was going to be my next question is like, how does it feel now to have brought light, not only had to have brought light to where you were at and what you're doing, and you've uncovered a lot in the last couple of months, but also to know what to do moving forward. How does that feel?
It feels great. I mean, I think I still have a lot to learn, but I have taken this break and, focusing on this. Like my parents have even taken their own like accountability to another level because they watched me
Yay.
come from nothing, no knowledge whatsoever, and be like, I'm going to fire my CPA
Mhm.
because I have no idea what he's been doing with my taxes. This looks so whack.
Mhm.
And I do it myself. Like I did my own taxes, like basically this last year, coming from having no clue, like even how to like categorize or like, so I learned how to do QuickBooks and everything because I was like, I can manage it. It's not like I have like a million employees and like a
Right.
million and mortgages and shit. Like my life is pretty simple as of right now. And maybe it was supposed to be that way so that I could get to this moment. But I was like, why do I have like all these people that I'm paying, you know, to do this stuff when it's just me? I don't even have any kids or anything. Like
Mhm.
I could probably do this. And so I was like, I'm going to do it. So I got on QuickBooks and I had all the setup calls and I learned how to do it. And is it fun? No. Has it made me want to unalive myself multiple times? Yeah. I feel like also like I have to accept at a certain point, like I'm just not a numbers person. Like I will never be like someone like you. That's what they really understand. Like never say never, I guess, but it just doesn't. If I hear about it for too long, like I want to jump out a
And
window.
that's
So
okay. Yeah.
yeah,
And that's why it's like, that's why my focus always like, let's make this as easy on you as possible. Cause most people don't want to be spending time in spreadsheets and like paying attention to every last dollar that they spent. So it's like, how do we make this easy for you so that you do stick to it? And it is simple and it isn't something that makes you want to unalive yourself.
yeah. So again, I did the QuickBooks and I was like, I should be able to do this. This is like really easy. And my parents were like, well, we have so many, like they were overcomplicating their own stuff. And
hmm
I just like was like, what y'all complicated my stuff from like a young age. It's that complicated actually. Let me take a look. And it wasn't. And so I like got rid of like my CPA and ended up doing my own taxes and having somebody on Fiverr look at them and file them for me. And so my parents were able to actually start QuickBooks. And like my mom thinking, oh, like this is so confusing. I can't do this. Like
hmm
she saw me do it. And so she was like, wait, maybe I can do it. And so she has been like, and she has way more accounts and they have a lot more like going on than I do. And she's been able to do it. And I'm like, because of me, because of Chloe. So- And I want my mom to talk to you, by the way. So I told her that
Aw.
she needs to make an appointment with you for sure. So
So now going back to this transition period of your life where you're like, all right, you're not saying no to acting, you're saying like, I want to kind of reserve that for something I really want to do, like when the right role comes along. But you've also been kind of shifting into like, well, what else do I want to do right now?
Right.
Like I'm an
Yeah.
actor, comma, and what else do I
Yeah.
want to be doing right now? So for you, kind of how has the shift in identity been from a mindset perspective for you? Like, has it been difficult shifting from like, I'm an actor and this is the only thing that I do to like, I want to also explore these other things?
I mean, it's been extremely difficult and crippling at times. And I still feel it like come up sometimes, but it's my own like inner like mind. It's like no one else is judging me. No one else is like looking at me or gives a shit. So it's like a hurdle that I try to overcome like all the time. And like I'm realizing no one's coming to save me, you know, like
Mhm.
maybe he will, that'd be great. But no matter what, I always want to take care of myself. Like I think I thought too, like, I'll just marry a rich man. And like
Oh, we
that's
all, yeah, we're like
yeah.
societally made to believe that. Thank you, Disney.
Mhm. So I was kind of like waiting till I met somebody to get my shit together, basically. And I was dating a lot, like, cause I was like, I think I should just meet somebody and then it'll all
And
take
then
care of
we'll
itself.
figure it out. Yeah.
Like, I'll figure it out after that. Like, I can start my life after that. And then it kind of hit me like, no, like, you need to start your life now, like, be added unto you. Like, you can't chase somebody else when you're waiting to start your life to like meet someone.
Mhm.
And that's not how it's going to work, or that's not how it works. So I was like, well, shit, you know? So I kind of had to have that mindset adjustment too, because I do want to have a family. I'm 33. Like, I do want to, you know, meet my person and start a family. And I think I was like really focused on that instead
Mhm.
of focusing on like on myself, taking care of myself and letting that like come to me. Like I was kind of like really intensely like searching. Anyway, so recently I realized that wasn't the right way to go about it and shifted the focus back onto myself of like, okay, acting, you know, you have this new team now, this will be great, but you're not going to do a bunch of crap like I was being offered. And I just was like, I can't do this. Like, it's just against my
Mhm.
soul. So, okay, but what am I going to do in the meantime? And so I've been getting into like real estate investing. And like, I wish I would have done it 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but here we are. So I'm exploring that. Also, like potentially like an online business of like coaching or for like acting and
Mhm.
starting in Hollywood. And I'm also writing a book about my experience on the Hunger Games, which kind of I never really saw myself doing, but I just wanted to have some like digital like assets and have sort of like more to offer like my fans and stuff like that, because social media, like I don't know, I can't never find a way to like make money on my social media. I always come up against this like wall with it, and I don't know why. I have a call with my agents about it on Monday of like how to get that going.
Yeah.
But I was like, I want to like be produced, you know, have some sort of like, so I started writing a book, and I'm gonna, you know, it's gonna be out soon. And it kind of showed me, oh yeah, like I can really do this. And I love like taking courses. I love coaches like
Mhm.
you and like other coaches that I've been working with that I find on social media, you know, and I have gotten a lot of value from them. And I think I'm someone that could provide a lot of value as well. I don't really know the structure of that or what it would look like, but that is what I'm planning on after I finish my book, is like launching that kind of a thing
Yeah,
and
and
seeing
exploring
how.
it.
So yeah, because I buy like some courses and workshops and stuff, and I really get a lot out of it. So I think I could create something similar for the up and coming actor, you know. And I also just love like empowering like young women. So like even like confidence coaching or just like something like that, like life coaching for, I don't know, but I don't know what it looks like yet, but it's crystallizing as I like make move. I just got to stop thinking about it and just make a move. So I am doing that. And honestly, it feels like when I stop focusing on like everything outside and waiting around, and because like as an actor, I'm used to waiting around
Right.
for auditions, and I didn't have to do a bunch of shit in between. I was so often all my life. Like I had like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 auditions a week, and
Mhm.
I never had to think about anything else. And now it has slowed down so much. And when COVID slowed down, it was like such an eye opener. Like I genuinely have no life outside of like auditioning. Like I literally don't have any like no idea like what I do with myself or my time. So that was when the anxiety was like
Yeah.
all time high, and it still is sometimes. But that I'm like, okay, well then find some shit to, focus on and be passionate about. That's
Yeah.
not auditions. Like those aren't, it's just not the same anymore. And I wouldn't want it to be. Like I've done that. I laid that groundwork. I don't want to audition 4, 5, 6, 7 times a week. Like it's
Sounds
exhausting.
exhausting.
It's exhausting. And like that's, when you're in your 20s, like it's great. And I built
Sure.
that, reputation. So I'm glad. But what do I do with myself in the meantime? Like how do I
Yeah.
feel passionate and useful? And so that's what I'm exploring and not be waiting around at 33. How do I take action? So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm doing, finding, ways to do that. And since I started doing that instead of just waiting, like so many things are
The
like
doors have been
attracting and moving.
opening.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, this was the right move to start moving instead of just overthinking and sitting and wondering and panicking and doubting and freaking out. Like, okay, just try something and move forward.
It's
And
like giving yourself permission to play and discover and like figure
yeah,
out, what does Leven want? What does Leven like? Like how at this stage where you do have this level of freedom to finally explore who you are and what you want. It's like it all begins with picking something, trying it. And if you decide, don't really like it, moving on to the next thing, you know?
yeah, I feel like I overthought everything. Like when you don't have like auditions to focus on as an actor, it's like you're so lost.
Yeah.
And so that was like for the last kind of 2 or 3 years, I was just kind of halted, and it was so depressing, and I didn't know why I was so depressed. But I have to take control, right? And I was scared to try anything else because I didn't know. I had all these thoughts, I'm not capable of anything else, I've never done anything else, nobody wants this from you,
Sure.
everybody only wants that. Like you don't know how to do anything else, and this is what you do, not anything else. Like those were coming from inside, even like no one's telling me that, but those are the thoughts I was having. And so I had to like face those thoughts and be like, maybe I am qualified enough. Like I'm taking this awesome course right now by this creator called Mami Onami. Do you know her?
No.
Okay, she's like a spiritual badass on TikTok, and
Ooh,
I
okay. I'll
love her
check it out.
content. Yeah, so she talks about like enough, like this concept
Mm,
of enough is not a quantifiable thing. It's a mindset. Like you will never be thin enough when your mindset is like enough. If you have a number, you can reach that, but if you feel like you're never good enough, the goalpost will always be moving because there
yeah.
is no such thing as enough.
Hmm.
So when are you going to decide that you are like enough, qualified enough, healed enough, ready enough, And
Hmm.
so that's been a really like game changer for me of like, maybe I do have everything I need already and I don't need to, you know, wait another 5, 10 years to start something like this. So I'll, stay tuned, keep you posted. I really don't know how it's all going to work out right now, but
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see your growth as a person, as a budding business owner, as you move into this like next stage, because it's scary sometimes, I'm sure, because especially too, I know we had talked about like, sometimes as an actor feeling like even if you do dip your toe into something else, it almost feels like you failed or like you're
yeah,
you're accepting defeat. And it's like, no, not at all. I remember us talking about like Rihanna and J Lo. It's like these ladies
yeah,
are doing literally everything, and like I can certainly say they're not a failure. So, I
yeah,
appreciate you coming on and being vulnerable with your story because I think so often it's easy to see people like you, people who are in the spotlight, and being able to see like, wow, they have it all figured out. They know what they're doing. Wouldn't it be nice to like be in their shoes? And if you can't see the look on her face when I said that, it was like, what?
yeah. And like, I hope I don't come off as like unrelatable, and like, I feel so like common and so much of the like existential angst and financial angst and anxiety that like everyone feels. And I was talking to somebody about this yesterday where it's like, okay, you see me in like The Purge or whatever, or like
Mhm.
Netflix movie, and you're like, whoa, she's lives in a mansion in California. It's like they paid me $20,000 for that,
Oh
like
my gosh.
I got paid $45,000 at the end of that, and it's like
Yeah.
that's what you don't know. Like
Right.
sometimes like you're like working for like the clout, not for the money. And like, but you can't
Mhm.
pay fucking rent with clout, and you can't put a down payment on a house with clout. So, you
Right.
know, that's something that I don't think people understand. And I hope that makes me more relatable because
Yeah.
I look at myself too, and I'm like, when I was working like so much, I was doing stuff like that. And I'm like, well, I'm in a big movie. Look at me. No, like
Yeah.
the reality is they paid you scale. They paid everybody scale. And that's, whatever, like $5,000 a week, and then the 20%. And then, so it's like you ended up making like 45K, and
Mm-hmm.
you spent 4 months doing that.
Mm-hmm.
That was your 4 months of your year. And so, yeah, it's like, I even fool myself sometimes. Like, I feel busy, I'm working, but I didn't make that much money on that project. So,
Right. Right.
yeah.
And now there's the downtime in between that and the next project and trying to figure out what your next thing is. So,
Yeah.
no, I think this was really interesting in terms of like kind of demystifying what does go on in Hollywood and like how we often so over glamorize it. But it's like even people who have been in it for decades, like they still are facing very real challenges that we face every day as well, where it's just like, who am I and what do I want is one side of it, but also like the stability, both in the financial world, but also in the knowing what to do, knowing what's next and things like that. I think it's something we can all relate to. So,
Yeah.
all right, we're coming up on time. We're going to do something a little bit different for my Money Bear listeners. So usually we'll ask, what your first money memory is and if there's anything you're binging right now, but we're doing something fun because we had a question up on our Instagram stories yesterday to see what questions you had for Leven, and we had some funny ones. We're running short on time, so I'm only going to do 2 of them. But before I ask you these fun questions, tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, Instagram, Leven Rambin, TikTok, I love doing now at Leven Rambin, and Facebook, Leven Rambin. Yeah, just Google me and Google my socials, and
You'll
I
be
also have
there.
an album out on Spotify. That was a fun project.
Yes.
So,
Yes. She does it
um,
all.
and YouTube. So find me there.
Amazing. Okay. I'm trying to pick. Okay. I think this is a good one. What's the biggest hurdle you've had to face in acting and how did you overcome it?
I'm still in the hurdle.
You're like, I'm here right now, figuring out what's
The
next.
biggest hurdle I had to face, oh Lord, gosh. I guess it's like, yeah, the longevity and like those periods in between where you're like, what in the actual hell is going on? Like, I don't think anyone ever wants to hire me ever again. And I think I must be shit. And then you have to like mentally crawl out of that hole like every single time you're just about to get a job because you want to give up. And, I've read a lot of, even more established actors than me feel that way. So
Mm-hmm.
it's that, and not losing your mind and having like boundaries within your roles. Like you can be playing somebody like really crazy or emotional, and like how to cut that off sometimes like is really difficult.
I bet. Now, this came up in a couple of different ways, but I'm going to choose Grey's Anatomy. What's your favorite memory from Grey's? And then in parentheses, this person who passing time Bella was the person who asked this question. In parentheses said, she's literally the reason I watched it. I love. I'm like, oh, that's so sweet.
That is sweet. Like that's so sweet. I love that. Oh gosh, best memory of Grey's. Gosh, it was just so fun. Like it was like I think like my first like comedic kind of more role. I loved Eric Dane. He was so hot. Patrick Dempsey was also so hot. I was like 19, like they were just hot. And like that's who you want to be around when you're like 19, So I just like we had like fun little banter, and like they were so iconic. I just loved being like I was also like the youngest one. So like I felt like Ellen was like very maternal to me, and like they all kind of were maternal to me. They were iconic already. They were so
Yeah.
iconic. And like Kate Walsh to this day I still talk to, and so I guess like a funny memory I had was like there was a scene where I was with Eric Dane on the couch, was like I didn't know if the scene was like emotional or like not, because it was kind of campy, like the role
Yeah.
sometimes. And I just struggled so hard with the scene, and he just was like dying. Like he was helping me, but that's not really a good story. But I remember I felt like I had no idea how to act anymore. And I just it all went out the window, and I was like blanking. And he was like kind of pulling my weight and helping me on that. And he's a cool dude. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
What a cool memory. And like,
Oh, okay. Great. Take
okay,
that
go
out.
ahead.
This is a better memory. So there was like, it was like a Thanksgiving scene or like a dinner, a Christmas scene where it was like a dinner, and it was every single cast member around this long table and me. Every iconic face of like Grey's Anatomy was like sitting there at the table, and then me. And I was like, this is so freaking cool.
That's got to be so wild to
It
just
was
be
so
like,
cool.
I can't believe I'm at this table with all of these people right now.
That's what it felt like. Yeah.
Very cool. I love that. Well, thank you for coming on, Leven. This was really fun and something different to talk about today. I really appreciate you opening up and kind of sharing your background and experiences. And I have no doubt people will relate to it as well.
Cool. Well, thanks
Yeah.
for what you do, and thanks for having me on.
Heck yeah. Thank you so much for listening to the Money Bear podcast. If you've made it this far, do us a favor, take 2 seconds, rate, review, and subscribe. It seriously means the world to me. And if you just take a sec to do that, I will appreciate you endlessly. And if you do, let me know on Instagram and I'll thank you personally. So, got that. And of course, since we were talking about anything financial on this show, please note that nothing on this show is intended as financial advice. I don't know you, unfortunately. And because of that, I cannot tell you what to do with your money. You got to work with a financial professional who knows your situation, who is preferably a fiduciary. And keep in mind that everything that we talk about on this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. It's all my opinion. So, there's that. If you want to see our full terms and conditions, head on over to the show notes. And while you're there, we've got free resources for you to get started on your money journey down in the show notes as well, including a free guide to help you with your budgeting templates and budgeting tutorials and investing 101, understanding the different accounts that are out there. All that good stuff is inside of my free guide, which is also available at thelazyinvestorscourse.com/guide. And if you're ready to take our relationship to the next level, I am also hosting a monthly investing class. And that investing class, you can find the times we're offering it this month at thelazyinvestorscourse.com/webinar. That link is in the show notes as well. And that's where you have the chance to meet me live and ask those money questions live. It's a good time. We've had over 20,000 people as of recording this join or register. And yeah, it's always nice to meet you guys. So I hope to see you there. Again, all that is available down in the show notes. So thank you again for coming and listening. I appreciate you, and I'll see you next week.